Jenny, prepare yourself for a shock. I'm the Rocketeer. The Rocker who? Oh, for crying out loud, haven't you read the papers? I'm Liam, this is Rob, and welcome to the Hey Guys podcast. This week, we're looking back at one of the most faithful comic book adaptations of all time, a movie that bombed back in 1991, but one that, despite being a bit of a narrative mess, has garnered a passionate cult following in the subsequent years. A genuinely classic Disney movie in many respects, Joe Johnston's The Rocketeer does a lot right, but never quite feels the sum of its considerable parts. And at this point, Rob tells me The Rocketeer is his favorite movie of all time, of course, but... because as always, we don't talk about this beforehand. I don't know how you feel about it, and I'm becoming accustomed to you completely disagreeing with me at this point.
No, so it's not my favorite movie of all time, but I do enjoy this movie. I have seen it quite a few times in the past, but again, nostalgia. I saw it when I was a kid. Yeah. What I wanted to say, it was ironic that you chose that quote, "The Rocker Who," because I think that's how American audiences felt. Because this was released the same time as Terminator 2, so nobody actually saw The Rocketeer in cinemas.
It was up against some really stiff... It was like Terminator 2, it was Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Yeah. There was like a whole bunch of movies this was up against. I mean, it was an uphill struggle, I think, anyway. I think it's a relatively tough sell, but with all that as well, it was always going to be tricky.
But to be fair, I always thought this was a great film. I always enjoyed this. I haven't seen it for a while. Now, to be fair, probably in the last 10 years was the last time I saw it. But I always thought there was more actual Rocketeer scenes.
Well, that's one of my big issues with this film, is that this film, and of course, it was supposed to be part of a trilogy. And, you know, we're used to it nowadays, you know, kind of these movie studios putting the cart ahead of the horse. Yeah. And there's definitely that kind of vibe here, where by the end of the movie, he feels like the Rocketeer. By the end of the film feels like the start of the film. And it was a similar issue, a film I oddly bring up all the fucking time. The Lone Ranger had a similar issue, where it fucked around for 2.5 hours. And similar to this, it was fun, it was messy, and by the end, you're like, well, he's the Lone Ranger now, but the film's just ended. And it was like, you know, if this was, to me, when I was rewatching it, and I got to be honest with you, I must have seen it when I was a kid, but I could remember nothing about this film, like absolutely nothing. It was like watching it for the first time. And as I was watching, I was like, this feels like a modern day Disney Plus TV show, like a big budget Disney TV show. And it would have suited that so much better, because if you got to that point by the end and you've got the reveal at that point where it's the Nazis and all that jazz, and feels like the Rocketeer, and then you have, I don't know, episode 3, I think it totally would have worked. And it's got that same sense of humor and everything. But with the movie, it just feels like when it ended, I was like, man, it feels like it's just about getting going. And now it's like the brakes have been put on. And obviously, you know, that might have been fixed if we'd got the subsequent sequels, if it had been a success, but it wasn't. So
yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's a lot of him running away from guys in suits, whether they're the FBI or the gangsters or anything like that. There's a lot of him running away from them. And then when he's all of a sudden, you know, I can control this, I can fly. He gets his great Rocketeer, and I know I'm jumping straight to the end. He gets his great Rocketeer moment. He stands on the telescope, the observatory, you know, he flies off, great. And then in less than a second, he's already on the ship, so his Rocketeer moment is done. And then he gets one more Rocketeer moment where Lothar, and we will get to Lothar, how a guy that big can be that nimble.
Or a guy who looks like that is in this movie. That's my other issue, but we'll get to that too.
Well, he belongs in a Dick Tracy film. And
he absolutely belongs in Dick Tracy.
And then the Rocketeer gets pushed off and he goes around the Zeppelin, comes back and then takes... And there is Rocketeer moments. I will say, right, you said I was going to say this is my favorite film, but I had a soft spot for these serial remakes. So you got this, you've got Dick Tracy... You've got The Shadow. I'm sorry, I'm apologizing right now. And you've got The Phantom. I've
got those exact same films. Yeah. I've got Dick Tracy, The Phantom. Like basically all those films I've got, like they all come from Batman. Like basically Batman hit big in 1989. And I know people don't think of it as being like a period piece, but it really is. It's like everyone's wearing like Stetsons. Yeah. It's kind of like, it's got that, like this film, it's got that retro futuristic style. So all these kind of, companies looked at Batman and went, oh, we want some of that. So they all started like kind of snapping up these. Obviously, this had already been snapped up, I think, in the 80s, but in terms of getting it produced and made at this point, like, all right, we want something like Batman. And that's why you had all these films that they basically, the 30s superheroes films.
Well, that's the difference.
None of them worked. None of them worked.
In this one, it was set in 1938, and I think the Phantom was actually set in the 40s or the 50s as well.
Yeah, but it's the same kind of era, yeah.
But the Shadow and Dick Tracy were meant to be not period pieces. They were actually just meant to be neo-noir. This is our time now. So, and to be fair,
they've got. You see what I mean? Though they've got that vibe. Though,
yeah. To be fair, none of them worked.
No, they don't.
I don't know what it was about.
They worked to different degree. I'd make the argument that the Rocketeer and Dick Tracy both worked to an extent. There's great stuff in both those films. Don't get me wrong, The Phantom and The Shadow are dog shit. They're just bad films.
But there's great stuff in all of it, and that's what I'm trying to say. Right?
I knew you'd defend them. I fucking knew you'd defend them.
And that's it. Me as a kid, I say me as a kid, I'm nearly 40. But me as a kid, I love these things. I watch these films more than I have a right to as a kid.
I mean, what was the tagline to The Phantom? Was it like punch evil in the face?
Slam evil. Was it slam evil or something?
Slam evil. That's it. Slam evil. Yeah. Let's be clear, is no better than punch evil in the face.
I'm not disagreeing with you, right? I mean, taking the Rocketeer out of it, because we'll talk more about that, and maybe taking Dick Tracy out of it, because I haven't seen that for a while. But I haven't seen any of these for a while. They are dog shit. I'm not taking it away from.
I really don't think there's major problems in all of them, but I think there are redeeming qualities in both Dick Tracy and the Rocketeer. And the thing is with both of them, and I almost find it more annoying, is that they're close to greatness. And if we bring it back to this film, unlike, as I say, The Phantom and The Shadow, I don't think there's any saving those films. I think they're just conceptually bad, and they're just poorly made movies, I think, for the most part. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have loved them and they'll disagree, but whatever. But to bring it back to the Rocketeer, what drives me crazy is that this has all the constituent parts of being a fantastic movie. It just has everything you would hope for. It's like it has all the ingredients, but then somebody decided to cook it in the dishwasher and something hasn't quite worked. It's like, I look at this film and it's absolutely gorgeous. Like the Art Deco sheen that you see in the posters, it's not just a gimmick. It's plastered all over the movie. Like that 1938 LA look is absolutely gorgeous. This film, I mean, in terms of just the direction from Joe Johnston, I think, and I know he gets like a bit of jib for being kind of lesser Spielberg, which he is, and if you're going to be lesser anyone, you might as well be lesser Spielberg. I think he's done a great job of bringing the era, of bringing the technology to life. I think it's got a largely great cast. Again,
which premise... is random, right? You say about the great cast, completely, the most, who's it? The most well-known actor back in then was Timothy Dalton.
Well, yeah, he was literally, this is 2 years after Bond.
Yeah. So he's the most well-known actor, and they made him the villain. I bet people just turned around and went, what?
Well, no, I think maybe it's you've had someone who's like James Bond, and obviously he wasn't as successful, but it's kind of like now where you get Daniel Craig playing Benoit Blanc. It's kind of like you get a lot of these people after they play Bond, and they are like the quintessential movie hero in many respects. And then it's like they want to do something different. And I know he's only had like a 2-movie run, but I can imagine after, he's got this like history of like stage acting and everything, and you can really see it in this film. Like he's borderline, it's kind of inching towards Hot Fuzz. But I can understand why you took this part and maybe why they wanted him in it. And I actually think he's the best thing in this film.
He is loving it. He is loving playing Errol Flynn. And
that's a big issue with this film. If you don't realize he's playing Errol Flynn, and it is clear, when they go to the set of the movie he's shooting, it's
the Laughing Bandit is basically Robin Hood.
It is, yeah. The way they go up the stairs is one of the most famous scenes. But I don't think everyone will necessarily get, one, that it's an Errol Flynn thing. And the other issue is you almost, for this movie to work on the first viewing, you also kind of need to know that Errol Flynn was famously, supposedly at least, supposed to be a Nazi sympathizer. Certainly his wife was like a known Nazi sympathizer, and it was thought that he was as well. And of course, that's all leaning into the big reveal that comes 80 minutes into this movie.
Into this 90-minute movie.
Dude, it's a massive issue. It's a massive issue because I went into this and I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure he is a Nazi, but even I couldn't remember. I wasn't 100%. And I was like, if you don't know that, and you're watching this film, for 80 minutes, there's no stakes. There are no stakes. It's basically, like you said, it's a lot of people running around in circles. You've got Timothy Dalton's character as Neville Sinclair, and you're like, well, I don't know why he wants the backpack. He just does. Why has he got this giant goon with him who's from Dick Tracy, a completely different movie? But he's also hiring local mafia to chase the Rocketeer, who isn't really like he just wants to keep hold of the backpack. There's no like greater good at this point. Of course, towards the end, when they suddenly and very abruptly drop the entirety of Nazi Germany into the middle of LA at the end of the film, suddenly the stakes make sense. The Nazi reveal for this film needed to come 30 minutes earlier. Yeah. Because for 80 minutes, there are zero stakes. And I'm watching the film, I'm like, why am I supposed to care about fucking any of this? It's like, if you're watching it, you're like, Timothy Dalton's character is quite charming. I was like, are we supposed to be rooting for him to get with Jenny? I don't really get it, but bizarre.
Here's one, right? Bizarre. Here's one for you. One of the things that takes me out of the film, and yes, I know of everything, there's always something I concentrate on that's a bit too... that I shouldn't really be concentrating on.
Oh, dude, I know exactly where you're going, because me and my wife both have the exact same problem. I know exactly what you're going to say.
Okay, go on. Yes.
Jennifer Connelly's boobs.
No, actually, no.
Oh, my God. No. Dude, honestly, Jennifer Connelly's boobs are a character unto themselves in this film.
Yes, they are.
I've run the numbers. If you take Jennifer Connelly's boobs out of this movie, it's 58 minutes long. It's this film is obsessed with her breasts.
The old soup splash. And they concentrate.
There's the soup splash earlier. Then they bring in a character for no reason to be really lewd. And they put the camera from his point of view for no reason, just so they can go, remember her boobs? Look at her boobs. I was sitting there watching the film with my wife, and I'm just like, I'm going to have to bring this up. I was like, do you find her boobs distracting? She's like, yes, they're fantastic. We all agree. They're like the greatest boobs ever. But they're massively distracting. So, sorry, not what you were going to say, unbelievably.
No, but I mean, I kind of feel like I'm letting people down now about the thing that took me out of the film, right? It happened twice in the film. You have these flying machines that are meant to protect you from the elements, right? Mm-hmm. And Cliff's canopy can be taken out with one punch.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you got the Zeppelin, which people are traveling around in, living in by the feel of it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, don't worry. He's the finest pilot in all of Germany. He's great. He's fantastic. He gets scared because Lothar crashes through one of the glass, and he's able to run and jump out of the other.
Yeah, did he? Right. Glass. I can see what your issue is that the glass isn't strong enough. Now, let's be clear. This is a classic Rob issue with movies where you pick something utterly bizarre and got caught up, not by the fact that Jennifer Connelly's boob should get like fourth billing in this film. No, it's that the glass breaks too easily in this film. I totally get what you mean. But my big issue was like, did the guy just jump out of the window?
Because it's the angle of it as well. Because Lothar came crashing through straight. He turned around, ran, turned left, and jumped out of a pane of glass to the left.
I rewound that, and I still couldn't figure out. I was like, did he just fall awkwardly, or is he just committed suicide like an absolute lunatic?
I think he couldn't prove that he was the finest pilot in Germany.
So you think you kind of like the Japanese, like the German equivalent of like Harikiri, where you just like, we don't stab each other with swords, we jump out of Zeppelins.
Yeah,
like, that's what we do.
I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Well, it's strange that like that would be your problem. My issue, and it all comes about early in the film, and it comes back again to that script. Like I like the script in terms of the conversations and then like the dialogue.
Up to the point, but saying "punched me in the kisser," I didn't like.
Yeah, it's a bit on the nose sometimes, but my bigger issues are the larger scripts. Like there are just so many coincidences. It's like the opening sequence is actually pretty fun, but they just so happen to stash the rocket at the home of a hotshot pilot. It's like, okay, there's coincidence one, but then what's his name? The lead, Billy
Cam, or he credited Bill Campbell, isn't it? But his name in this is fantastic. Cliff Secord.
Yes, it's Cliff Secord. That's it. The second name in particular is pretty bonkers.
Yeah.
But he just so happens to not only be dating a girl working for the man after the rocket, but he also goes to the lot or the set, whatever you want to call it, and spills the beans within spitting distance of Timothy Dalton.
Yeah.
It's just bad script writing. It's just, all right, we don't know how to get A to B, B to C, so we're just going to have a whole bunch of coincidences. And it's a shame that it happens so early in the film. I'm like, just by chance, like they hide this away at, like, you know, the one guy who might have the, you know, the guts to strap it to his back and give it a test flight. It's like, all right, come on, guys, Jesus Christ. But it is, like you said, there's a lot to like, but there's so many issues with the script.
Did you think this was all PV's fault as well? The whole thing was PV's fault.
You mean Geppetto? What the fuck is up with Alan Arkin's fucking mustache? Again, a bit on the nose for a Disney film, but sure, why not?
It was his fault.
It was his fault, yeah. No, I'd go with that.
Do you know why?
No, go for it, though.
Because he removed the chewing gum off the plane right at the beginning. He took the bad luck away, and it all just went Pete Tong after that.
He's like, what was his game? It's like, that was, like, they leaned so heavily into it, didn't they? The whole chewing gum thing.
Yeah.
It was like, again, this whole, like, narrative device, which actually did pay off at the end of the film. Like, that's why Timothy Dalton's character, Neville Sinclair, ended up blowing up the whole chewing gum.
What made Rob feel sick? Alan Arkin fishing around Cliff Secord's mouth for a piece of chewing gum with his dirty fingers. What
it's weird. Doing? Like, Alan Arkin, who, let's be clear, is a bit of a vampire. He's one of those guys like Steve Martin, who's looked like 55 for about 45 years.
Yeah.
And for the most part, he's really good. But there's like one line where they're getting told about Jenny, and just it's like, oh God, no. And it's just like, in a film where he's otherwise brilliant, just this horrendously bad line reading. I'm like, is that the best take you could have got out of Alan fucking Arkin? Unbelievable. But that's not our biggest issue. If we're talking about the cast, the biggest issue, is it Lothar? Is that his name?
Yeah, Lothar.
Well, that's one of my big issues with this film, is that I know people love it because it's a really true representation of the comic book, like this really kind of accurate adaptation. But the problem is, like, with a lot of movies, and certainly adaptations, the gift is knowing when to say no, basically. And what I think, the ones that spring to mind, often we're both massive Stephen King fans. Yeah. And I think of The Shining. I love The Shining, the book, but the reason the movie works so well, you know, it helps as, of course, directed by Stanley Kubrick, but it's because he knew what wouldn't work on screen. And you see what happens when movies are too loyal to the source material. And again, the one that jumps out is It Chapter 2, where it's very true to the book, the second part of the book, and it's fucking horrible on screen. A lot of it just doesn't work on screen, but they put it up there anyway. And this movie, 80% of the source material works beautifully up on screen. Again, we talked about like the setting, the Art Deco visuals, all that jazz. The suit looks amazing, hasn't aged a day. But the other 20% is the stuff that needed to be cut. And a big part of that is stuff like Lothar. One, he doesn't make sense. Why is he with Neville Sinclair? It's never explained.
Yeah,
Two, we've already mentioned...
Is he a Nazi, or is he just somebody getting paid? Or
I don't know. I have no... He's just... And like you said, you've got to bang on. He looks like he's come off the set of Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
He does not belong in this world. And I'm sure, I got to be honest, you know, full disclaimers, I haven't read the comic book. I'm sure he works just fine on the page. He does not work on the screen whatsoever. It just adds to that the confusion I talked about earlier, about the fact that there's this weird circle of additional characters. Like, I don't know why they're here. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know why this is important. And like I said, by the end of the film, once the Nazis show up in LA, and we'll get to that in a minute, the thing that's left is I still don't know what the fucking deal is with Lothar. Yeah. I just don't like him in this film at all.
I haven't read all of the Rocketeer comics. Now, I have read a few Rocketeer comics, or graphic novels in the past, but I don't remember coming across Lothar in the comics. So
oh, really?
Yeah. But like I said, I haven't read the full extensive library.
Why did they add him for this then?
But what? I didn't mind the fact that he was there. Neville Sinclair needed a henchman that was larger than life. I get that.
Did he though? No, because earlier in the film...
Yeah, because he needed somebody that was, I guess, a Nazi sympathizer as well, because that dude wasn't a Nazi. What I didn't get...
Yeah.
Right, I know you're jumping at the bit. What I didn't get is how... And I know big guys can be nimble, but how nimble this guy was. Good because point. Either he was able to traverse the hospital walls to get into the room, or he was able to get past the guy. I know the copper was flirting with the nurse, but I'm sorry, no, unless you're actually going at it like hammer and tong in the back room, you're going to see a guy that size walk past you. It's going to happen.
He's like the least inconspicuous person possibly of all time.
And there's another coincidence for you, is right. They've got that TV on. Like 1938 must be the introduction of surround sound, because they were so loud they were unable to hear the dude screaming as he's being folded in half in the home.
Well, yeah, and again, there's another issue with Lothar. We're talking, about him being from another film. The whole folding people in half stuff, it just doesn't belong in this film. It's just like, dude, this is Dick Tracy shit again.
Yeah, it is.
It's really fucking weird. And I know you say like he needs a henchman. I think retrospectively, and again, maybe it's because we're coming at the film from different directions, because you have this nostalgic attachment to it. You've seen it a lot. Whereas for me, like I said, it was really like watching it for the first time again. I'm like, for 80 minutes, Neville Sinclair doesn't need a henchman because you don't really know what his plan is. Like, at that point, like, he's not a Nazi. He's just an actor, and he's a charming actor at that. And you're like, well, why has he got this giant, like, buffoon of a dude? Or buffoon's maybe a bit harsh, but, this kind of, this goon, whatever you want to call him. But then he also has to hire the mob. It just becomes really confusing. And I'm like, who's in it for what? I don't know. As I said, I found it all incredibly confusing. And admittedly, it all makes sense a bit more after the big reveal at the end of the film. Yeah. But even the big reveal, like I mentioned the fact that it comes too late in the movie. And not only does it impact the first half because you don't really know what's going on or why you should care, but so much happens so quickly at the end of the film. Like, I think they make a half-assed explanation earlier in the film for why a Zeppelin would be flying over LA, but the fact that nobody is aware that there's a Zeppelin until it creeps over the top of the building is fucking bananas.
That's what I didn't get as well, and I've never noticed that in the past before, where he goes to the cinema and they have that thing about it doing a world tour.
Yeah.
Why is it doing a world tour when it's a Nazi plane anyway, a Nazi Zeppelin? Why are they letting it go into the air? That's what I don't understand.
Well, I guess at that point, maybe for political reasons, because this is a year before World War II started.
Yeah.
And they're still kind of like tiptoeing around the whole Nazi thing. Nobody wants them to kind of, oh, well, they're saying they're not going to invade Poland. They're not going to start World War II and all that other jazz. So maybe we can make the argument that there is a political reason to allow a Zeppelin with, giant swastikas emblazoned on the side. Maybe. I'm really giving the benefit of the doubt.
Because you're telling me a trigger-happy American is not going to take pot shots at something that could blow up.
I mean, I'm struggling. I gotta be honest with you, mate. I haven't really got an argument for it.
Just some random trigger-happy American in LA thinking, oh, you know what? I could stand on the highest thing and just take a pot shot at that. And it's filled with hydrogen.
It's pretty bonkers. I mean, my major issue though, yes, that is all insane. But the fact that nobody's aware that it's there until it's like literally above them is one thing.
I know.
And then when Timothy Dalton, who, let's be clear, is already pretty wild with the accent. Like, I don't know what accent he's going for 80% of this film. Like, I'm like, is he being British or is he trying to be American?
I think he's trying to be British, yes.
Well, I mean, he is British. Obviously, he doesn't sound Welsh, but it's a strange accent. Maybe it's just his, and maybe I overthought it. But at the end, when he suddenly goes full German with a dodgy German accent and calls out the Nazis, and they just come out of the bushes.
I know.
There's so many Nazis. He's just like, what? How are they all just on American soil dressed as Nazis?
This was all happening, right? And nobody could hear them pull up. Nobody could hear the FBI pull up with spotlights.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Everybody shows up and everyone is completely blind to the fact that they are surrounded by apparently thousands of people. The FBI are there, the Nazis are there, a fucking Zeppelin's there, and everyone's like, I don't see anything wrong with this situation at all. It's so the end.
When the spotlights came on and they went, "Breeze, you're surrounded with the feds," or whatever they said, they'd have to get those spotlights out. They'd have to plug them in. They'd have to do something.
Well, it's the fact that the people there. So you're talking about. Sorry, I keep forgetting his name, which is bad. So Cliff and all those jazz, they don't realize the Nazis are there. The Nazis don't realize the feds are there. Nobody realizes the Zeppelin's there. And it all comes down to the fact that they've rushed the ending because they took too long. Again, the biggest issue over this film is they took too long for the Nazi reveal. Like, if you make the Nazi reveal 20 minutes earlier, it suddenly gives so much more agency to Cliff. If he's aware of it, And it's not only is this girl, Jenny, being taken by this actor, but he's a Nazi sympathizer or actively
he's an
working
actual Nazi.
Yeah. Well, he finds this out kind of like 20 minutes earlier. It suddenly had so much more drama and narrative drive for both the character and the movie itself. But instead, it just goes round in circles. And of course, as soon as he finds out he's a Nazi, Paul Sorvino immediately turns on him, of course. And then you've just got everyone shooting at everyone. And instead of it becoming a Rocketeer against the Nazis, it becomes almost like the Americans against the Nazis at the end of the film. Like I said, this is a potentially great film, which drives me crazy, but there are some really poor choices. A lot of it I'm willing to overlook, for instance, that Cliff should be on fire all the time.
And also,
he should just be on fire.
How are they not refueling that tiny jetpack? Like, he's used it quite a lot.
What did he say? I'm sure Geppetto, or Alan Arkin's character, what's Alan Arkin's Peavy? I hate that name, Peavy. I'm sure he makes a kind of comment earlier in the film that it runs on something bizarre.
It runs on alcohol.
That's it. Yeah. So,
but still, you're going to have to put some whiskey or vodka or something. I know that's not the alcohol. I'm taking the piss. But and the fact they took a ricochet and it was fixed with chewing gum, that we'll get over. Did you think as well the shoehorn of Howard Hughes? Now, I appreciate like you had how, but then the whole shoehorn of the spruce moose will fly. Like, why was that needed? I
don't know. I think the character who basically creates it is, I'm pretty sure in the comic books, is another comic book character, and I've got the name of the one off the top of my head. I do have it in my notes, but I'd have to sift through it. Sorry. So I think they were just like, listen, we don't have to pay for the rights for another comic book character, so we're going to use Howard Hughes to kind of put you in that, put you in the time, put you in the place kind of thing. And I'm not against the idea, but again, it's used so sparingly. So you just have like Howard Hughes just kind of randomly popping in and out of the movie, and actually plays a pretty big part in the finale, which is quite bizarre, when he gives in the plane and all that jazz. But Howard Hughes stuff.
Yeah, I love how you say that's the finale where he gives him the plane, not the fact they're flying this Leonardo da Vinci thing to rescue them at the end of the Zeppelin.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird nods, and again, it comes back to the fact that the action scenes all fall a little bit flat. Like, I do like the fact that they put an emphasis on physical effects, but the flying stuff, and maybe it's just come a few years too early. There's no CG. This is very much old-fashioned way of old-fashioned movie making, and for the most part, it works. But when it comes to the flying, you realize that kind of technology hasn't really moved on much since 1977 and Superman. It looks very similar. Like, you can't move. A lot of the flying stuff actually reminded me of the end of Jingle All the Way and Turbo Man. Like, it's very similar.
I kind of think that the flying stuff held up to a point. When he was randomly doing maneuvers in the air, that's when it kind of, you could see the cell framing.
Yeah, 100%. But and also that's when you start asking questions, because it doesn't make sense. He doesn't have any levers. He just has an on-off button. Like I said, if we take away the fact that should be burning his legs to a cinder, okay, whatever. But it's like, I don't know how he's controlling it. I have no fucking idea.
His helmet's a rudder.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's the whole point of that thing at the back. Peavy says it in the film.
Oh, does he really? Okay.
Your head is a rudder, so you got to use your eyes, because if you look left or look right with your head, you're turning that way.
I must have missed that. And in fairness, I'm not convinced that totally makes sense. But maybe I'm just using that as an excuse.
I love how that part doesn't make sense when you've already said he should be a paraplegic at this point. Like,
dude, immediately his legs should be on fire. There's nothing protecting his legs from the fire. None. But whatever. We'll allow it. Like I said, I'm willing to overlook those things as part of the whole movie magic thing. As I said, my big issue, your big issue is poorly made glass. My big issue is the fact that narratively they've made some very poor choices with this film, but never mind.
I still think it's like, I will go on record and say it's still a great adventure. I really enjoyed watching it again for probably my 15th time. Probably I get that, and like I said, I don't think this is a bad movie. I just think it's a really, really flawed movie, and I always find this quite interesting, the fact that we're coming from different directions, that, you're so much more forgiving of these things when you're younger, and then it gets caught up in nostalgia because you love this film growing up, so you're very forgiving of these issues. But coming to it relatively fresh now, I just see it as this like missed opportunity, because
as I said, there's so much right about this film. It looks gorgeous. It's largely well acted, and we will get to the cast in a minute. And I really like the premise. And, when you watch this film, other than those aforementioned kind of, the flying scenes when it doesn't look quite right, for the most part, because it's set in 1938 and it has that gloss to it, this looks like it could have been made yesterday for 80, 90% of the film. It still looks watch this in HD on Disney Plus. It looks gorgeous.
Yeah,
from start to finish.
Stunning.
It doesn't look like a 1991 film. There's the occasional bit which kind of gives it away. But we had a similar thing when we rewatched Willow. Other than a few bits when they really go heavy on the CG and you're saying like, oh, this is the 80s. With that like clean HD transition's not the word. There's a better, no, it doesn't matter. When you're watching it, like this looks like it could have been made yesterday. And this has elements of that. And a lot of that comes down to Joe Johnston. And I always think he's like one of the oddest. He's had one of the oddest careers of any successful director.
I've got his list up here. Have you seen his list?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, what do you do? Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, 89?
Rocketeer 91. Page Master, 94.
Of course you picked. I didn't even put that down. Of course you put that down.
The Page Jumanji, October Sky with what's his name? Jake
Oh yeah, I haven't
when
seen
he
that
makes the again, it's an obsession with him. It must be because the October Sky is all about making model rockets. But then he goes from October Sky to Jurassic Park 3, Hidalgo, The Wolfman, Captain America: The First Avenger, which I argue was not made in 2011.
Well, it's insane, but that's an interesting one because obviously you can see why they picked Joe Johnston for Captain America because that was a big swing. Because of course now you look back, well, why wouldn't Captain America work? But back then you're like, well, you're gonna have to make a period Captain America film, and he's like, well, he almost got it right with The Rocketeer. So close. And you just think, oh, well, if you had that script writing team that they have with Marvel, you add that kind of level of quality Joe Johnston clearly has as a director, but you just nudge him in the right direction. It makes perfect sense that, like, don't get me wrong, I don't think Captain America is an amazing film, but it's the movie it needed to be to keep the MCU on the road in its early days. And like he did the Nutcracker and the Fallen Realms, like that was a relatively big film, but it's one of those odd ones. Like you said, you list those films. Those are all pretty big movies. But for the most part, if you said, well, what kind of makes Joe Johnston stand out? I'm like, his films look a little bit like Spielberg films. If you ask the average person on the street, could you name a Joe Johnston film? Their response would probably be, who the fuck's Joe Johnston? Yeah. He's basically like the only director who's had a similar career is Ron Howard. Ron Howard, I would argue, has been more successful, but he has that similar thing. Like you suddenly run through the list of Ron Howard films, you're like, fuck, Ron Howard made all of those? I don't think anyone knows the dude from Happy Days made all those fucking movies. And I think Joe Johnston has kind of like gone under the radar a little bit because he's kind of like, he's a good director, but he's never been quite top tier, I guess. But like I said, it's movies like this where he's 80% of the way there. So close to this being great, but not quite over the line.
It's funny. I was listening to you, I promise, but I just keep thinking now we need to do the Page Master.
Of course. Page Master, episode 100. The Page Master.
Well, we can't find Robot Jocks, so episode 100.
Maybe it is the Page Master. Yeah. Oh, gee, imagine we did that for episode 100. That would be such a fucking Rob choice. But speaking of issues with this film, I mentioned the fact that for the most part, the cast is really good.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Bill Campbell as Cliff Secord? Because obviously, like, he came from Dynasty, whatever you want to call it, and I think he'd been in Bram Stoker, but this was obviously supposed to be his big breakout movie, and it didn't quite work out. And he's still really busy, but he wasn't the next big Hollywood star.
Yeah.
I would argue he's perfectly fine in this film, but would this film be better if, say, like, I know they were talking about Johnny Depp read for this role. In my mind, I'm like, a 1991 Dennis Quaid. Maybe I'm just thinking of Inner Space, makes perfect sense. But does this movie work with I don't want to say better, but maybe a more kind of established star?
I don't know, to be fair. I mean, you get an established star. Is it really going to change the look or feel of the movie?
Yeah, it's a good point.
Because it's not. You still got the look and the feel, and most of the time as well. And I guess they would have, although they considered a lot of names, and you already said two, Johnny Depp, Dennis Quaid, they also had Kevin Costner, Vincent D'Onofrio, Emilio Estevez.
Vincent D'Onofrio stands out on the list, doesn't he?
Bill
as an odd one.
Yeah, Kurt Russell. Like, yeah, Vincent D'Onofrio was not far from his weird take in Adventures of Babysitting where he looked like Thor.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. See, when I think of Vincent D'Onofrio at that time, I'm still thinking of Full Metal Jacket. So
yeah, yeah, a little bit different. But are they covering his head as much in if they're getting established stars like that? Because
I think he gets plenty of time on screen, and if nothing else, he totally like you can see why he got the part because he fucking looks the part. He looks the part.
He is a handsome man.
100%.
And he does feel like somebody that you would have in those type of films in the 30s. Mm-hmm. So whether or not they get an established star, it works. I don't know if it will, because I think they'd be more to blame the established star then for what's happened, why it's become a box office bomb. But then again, the whole point of it, I mean, the reason why Will Smith and Tom Cruise are big is because people love these awful human beings. Like,
maybe.
Like, and they're getting drawn in. Oh, I got to watch the next Will Smith film. Why? The guy is a terrible actor and a terrible person.
A terrible actor. Settle down, mate. Settle down.
He's fucking awful.
He's not a terrible actor at all. Like, if you go back and watch I Am Legend, or you go back and watch, dude, like, there's problems with I Am Legend, but he's like, right, you've got to be.
Good, isn't it?
No, you've got to be, for you to basically be on screen on your own for 90 minutes. I don't think you appreciate like how much charisma you need to have, and you think there's not many people.
I do appreciate how much charisma.
The obvious one is like Tom Hanks in like Castaway. Like he absolutely holds the screen for an hour and a half.
And there's your difference.
And he's an Oscar winner. I think you're getting caught with the fact that he's a dick rather than the fact that he's a bad actor.
Tom Hanks in Castaway, and I confirmed that Will Smith was a dick before he showed the world he was a dick.
You did, yeah. I know. That was really bad timing on my part.
But Tom Hanks in Castaway carried that film perfectly. That is a great film. He is a great actor. Will Smith in I Am Legend carrying a film for 18 minutes on his own is not good.
Dude, that film made loads of money. I think my only issue with that film
it made loads of money, but that's where I go back to. It made loads of money because everyone wanted to see the next Will Smith film. And that's what I'm saying here. If you did have an established name, people probably would have gone to watch the established name, but it's not going to change the outlook or the aesthetic of the film, I don't think.
Well, if we remove dickheads, I mean, from the equation... I mean, that's the thing. Supposedly the nicest guy in the world. When I was watching this film, I couldn't help but think, if this film, say this film had been made 8 years later, and they asked Brendan Fraser to walk directly off the set of The Mummy, and they were like, oh, it's like, do I need to go to makeup? It's like, no, you're already dressed. And like, wait, but I'm dressed for The Mummy. It's like, yeah, you can just go straight into this film. What about my hair? No, that's the right hair. Dude, like, he literally looks exactly the fucking same. It's unbelievable. And I'm just like, right, he's good in this film. I don't like Cliff Secord's good in this film, but I'm like, if you added 1999 Brendan Fraser looking exactly the same, dressed exactly the same as he was in The Mummy, and he walks into this film, I'm like, this is a better film. This is a better film.
I can't disagree with you with that because, yeah, you've kind of found the kryptonite there because late 90s Brendan Fraser, especially as you say from The Mummy, going into this. Yeah, I mean...
And I don't want to share... Like, basically, all you're doing is you're going from a B+, which I think Cliff Secord is in this film, I think is really good, to a potential A+ with Brendan Fraser. But that still doesn't... Like I said, if I go back and watch this film, I don't think Bill Campbell's performance as Cliff Secord is the issue with this film. I think it's still the script and the timing and the pacing. There's the word I was looking for. The pacing is the big issue with this film. But I couldn't help but watch this film and think, man, if you have 1999 Brendan Fraser with scenes with like Jennifer Connelly's boobs, I'm like, oh my God. Like, it would just be so dreamy.
I wanted to make a joke when you're going about A+ and B+. I was going to say, you still talking about Jennifer Connelly's boobs again?
I mean, her boobs are absolutely magnificent in this film. And it's quite bizarre. You can see it was such a Disney movie. And if you go onto our Facebook page or whatever, you'll see like the most, once we put up this link, the poster that we've used, or Darry has put up specifically, and we should mention Darry because he's the one, he loves this film and he asked us to cover
it's Darry's choice,
is on the more recent posters for this film, like you go back to 91, there were all these absolutely gorgeous Art Deco posters. And, you know, they could, you wouldn't even have to like the film. You could just put it on your wall in the living room. They're that gorgeous. But the DVD cover, which is much more of a traditional DVD poster, Jennifer Connelly's on there. Her boobs are very covered up in that poster. And it's the same dress. And I'm like, I think there's been a bit of digital tomfoolery here because they are never covered up in this movie. But the thing is, I don't want to end the movie talking about...
I'll end the movie. Did you know Eddie Valentine, who was played by Paul Savino, was originally meant for Joe Pesci.
Oh, it totally would have worked.
Yeah. But then he turned it down and went on to do My Cousin Vinny, which I argue is probably a better choice.
I think so. I think Paul, like, do you want to see Paul Sorvino and My Cousin Vinny? I'm like, nah, I don't really want to. Like already the relationship between those two is a bit of a stretch. I don't know why, but Paul Sorvino, it just feels that much worse. Although speaking of dodgy relationships, Dalton was 45 when he made this film, and he was hitting on Connolly, who was 21, and she looks 21 in this film. Like, she's still got that cherubly look. She looks young, and there are moments. Because Dalton is 45 and looks 50. She's 21 and potentially looks 19. And you're like, this is a bit creepy, man.
Did you think, talking about Neville Sinclair as well, did you think he actually stabbed that dude? Like Neville Sinclair?
Oh, yeah, that was a weird one, wasn't it? Like, it was kind of half hinted, was it by accident or did he actually want to stab him? And I think they were trying to sell you on this idea that, he might be a bad guy. It's like, yeah, no shit. That was another weird scene which I didn't think really landed, and I was confused as well. I was like, "Wait, is this just an accident, or did he purposely stab that dude?"
You think there's a scene cut out somewhere where there was a little bit of drama between
100%.
Neville Sinclair and the guy who he was acting against, because he's like being stabbed, and then within 30 seconds of that ending, he nearly gets crushed by scenery. Which I argue, if that scenery fell on him, it's not going to do much damage anyway.
Yeah, but I think it would have hurt him for sure. But again, see, now I'm starting to pick holes in the film, and it comes back to that Zeppelin scene. And sorry, I do appreciate I'm jumping around, but I was thinking back to the fact that you've got an issue with the glass. My big issue with the end of the film, I had to bring it up, is he has, and when I say he, of course, I mean, what's his name? Neville Sinclair. He has Cliff Secord dead to rights on the Zeppelin. The Zeppelin's going down. He has the gun. He has the girl. Shoot him. Shoot him. Shoot him. I was shouting at the screen. Like, I don't want to take the side of the Nazis, but I was just like, why aren't you shooting him? He's there. You have a gun. Shoot him. You're like, we already have established you're mega evil, but Jesus Christ.
There's a comment I never thought I'd hear. I don't want to take the side of the Nazis, but shoot him.
Shoot him. Schnell. Schnell.
Also, you want to go for something that doesn't hold up. The Neville Sinclair death scene.
No, it doesn't at all. It's a shit version of the end of True Lies.
Yeah,
it's almost the exact same scene, but it's a rocket instead of a missile. But that scene doesn't actually hold up all that well in True Lies either, and it's just the technology is not there, and it just looks pretty dodgy.
The whole fireball thing, like that guy should have been. The way they talked about that rocket, if that blew up, he should have been obliterated. Not he should have been set on fire a little bit and then fallen into the land of the Hollywood land sign.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. The fact that they had the Hollywood's land sign and it blows up and leaves Hollywood. I actually quite like that. But it's kind of diminished by the fact that the scene just before it of him blowing up, essentially.
I love it as well. Everything
garbage.
in this film, and it's all saved by chewing gum.
And I mean, they make a big deal about that chewing gum.
That chewing gum has to be made of, I don't know, bloody super glue or something.
Well, don't they have, like, they make a point of the chewing gum that he's using at the end of the film, and supposedly they make a point of it because pilots back then used that specific chewing gum because it helped with, like, indigestion or some shit. It had, like, some kind of, like, pepsinin or something. I can't remember off the top of my head. But supposedly pilots all use that specific brand of gum. But again, alongside Jennifer Connelly's boobs, that gum probably has 6-bit billing in this film. It's quite bizarre. But,
I love the last thing I wanted to mention as well was, once again, you get something in the script in a film. And this one is, we need to go to the nationals. We need to do nationals. We did the regionals. Now we need to do nationals. Nationals of what? Regionals of what? Like, is it some sort of football in the sky? Like airplane races? Like, what's going on? Like,
we have no idea.
You've got the world's smallest plane, and it is the world's smallest plane. You've managed to squeeze a guy who has really large shoulders. And Bill Campbell, underneath that jacket, is quite a large dude at the time.
Oh, yeah, he's a big dude.
Yeah. And he is in the world's smallest plane, and he's competing for the nationals. The nationals of what? Well,
it's another issue with this film, the fact that there's fundamentally, the big issue of this film is that there's too much story for one film. There is. Like, that needs to be its whole side story. And I can't escape the idea that this would make a fantastic TV show. Like, I don't need to see a trilogy. This needs to be like 10 episodes. Like I said, if that finished, like, and it was like episode 2 and you had like a bunch more, I think it would work brilliantly. Like, and the pacing would make a lot more sense. And, you know, you could have more about whatever the fuck the Nationals are and all that jazz. And maybe we'd get a slight explanation of what the Bulldog Cafe is, because that's fucking bananas. I know it was kind of the era when they used to make all these giant, like, you know, I think that part of the world has, you know, it's like the biggest ball of yarn and all these other weird things. Like, why not have a Bulldog Cafe? But it is quite bizarre seeing that in the film and there being no explanation as to why it's in the shape of a dog.
Just because,
why not? And that is the thing. There is a lot of this film where the answer is just because, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for the film. Do you have a favorite scene that you picked out?
Yeah, it is the scene I've already said at the end. It's the classic hero moment. He's on the observatory or wherever it is. You know, everyone's looking at him. He checks his gun randomly. I don't know why. Like, he's just picked up a gun. It's the scene where he just looks at it, checks his gun, puts it in his pocket.
It's almost like a comic book cover scene, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Does his hero fly off, and then you get his name said in hero connotations. Go get them, Rocketeer. You know, and then to me, that is a favorite scene. I've always enjoyed that scene, so that's my favorite scene.
Mine's probably actually the Errol Flynn scene, and it's probably, you know, where they're like basically remaking Robin Hood.
Yeah,
and it's just, I think, because it sums up the movie. It's like, it's a really fun scene. It's kind of pointless with a convenient meeting of characters just to keep the plot moving. It's like, whenever I think about this film, I'm like, that scene in particular sums it all up. It's like, Timothy Dalton's great in it. It's like, I don't know why he stabs that guy. I don't know why, you know, Cliff is suddenly there at the lot to kind of just give away plot points. It's simultaneously a ridiculous scene and a really fun scene. But what it does, for me at least, is sum up the movie in so many respects. But I think it's just because I like Timothy Dalton, to be honest.
I mean, you can't not like Timothy Dalton after Bond is perennial. Every time you see him, you think, well, he's a villain on screen, isn't he?
Well, now we all just think the only thing he was missing were all the puns from Hot Fuzz.
Yeah,
he's just got an evil smile. Like, that's his issue.
I mean, does. You give him that mustache as well, and he is what, 30 seconds away from twirling it.
Oh yeah. He has played a villain quite a few times, and that doesn't come as a surprise. The only surprise was that he was allowed to be Bond. Although I actually thought he was a decent Bond. The movies weren't great, but I thought he was pretty decent. In terms of loves and hates, unsurprisingly, I've got more than 3 loves. So
your fourth is going to be her boobs, isn't it?
Oh, I've got Jennifer Connelly down as 2, but let's just assume that's what I mean. So number 1, like, being seriously, the pulp 30s aesthetic is absolutely timeless, bar some dodgy effects. It's so true to the graphic novel. I think the movie to this day looks, for the most part, absolutely spectacular. 2, Jennifer Connelly, yes, her boobs play a part, but I actually think she's really great in it. Number 3, we've already mentioned, so I won't go into the details again, but I think Timothy Dalton makes for a great villain. I just think it's a shame, and you mentioned it there about the whole twirling his moustache. I wish he'd got the opportunity to twirl his moustache earlier. He should have been twirling that moustache 50 minutes into this film, and it was a shame that he didn't really get to swing for the fences with that accent until rather late in the movie. And number 4, the Art Deco inspired marketing campaign and posters. I know that comes into the aesthetic, but I really do love, like, when you look back at those posters, like, how did this movie fail? But what it reminded me of a bit is, did you ever see Tomorrowland with George Clooney, another Disney film that flopped?
Yeah.
That also had absolutely gorgeous artwork, very similar style in many respects, also had a slow burn marketing campaign, but was probably like a bit too smart for its own good. And I think it's one of those, a lot of people appreciated both marketing campaigns, but it didn't necessarily give them a reason to go and watch those movies. And it's bizarre, like, there's so much overlap with those films because I think both of them have great actors, both of them look gorgeous, and both of them are just missing that, like, essential ingredient to make those movies work. And I feel very similarly about The Rocketeer as I do about Tomorrowland, a movie that I also like, but I'm like, it was so close to being brilliant, but it just didn't quite stick the landing, no pun intended. How about you, sir?
Jennifer Connelly, for me, she was really good in this, to be fair. She was only, what, like you said, 21. So she was I know she did Labyrinth and stuff, but she still wasn't a big name.
She wasn't established at this point.
No, exactly. So I think she did really well in this film. The aesthetic, the look of it, to a point, the flying scenes, everything, I think it looked fantastic. It still does now. It looks bright, it looks colourful, it it looks like the 30s. It's really, really. It's
the whole
really
film has that gloss all over it, and every shot really does jump off the screen to this day.
And randomly, I love the look of the Rocketeer. I loved it in the comics. I love it on screen. The rocket, the flight jacket, the helmet. And I appreciate when he says, "How do I look?" and PV says, "You look like a hood ornament." I get that. But I love that look, the iconic look of the Rocketeer. And I hope that, I know we'll get to in Legacy, but I hope that look doesn't change in the sequel. But
are they actually? Oh, we'll get to that.
We'll get to in Legacy. But I hope that.
No, that's the point.
That we need.
It doesn't need to change. That's the great thing about it. And that would have been if I was going further down the list, 5, 6 things I love. Like the aesthetic of the Rocketeer, the jacket, the actual rocket itself, and you out, like it's such an iconic look. It just doesn't have an iconic movie yet to go with it. But you don't need to change it at all. I absolutely agree. Is that everything?
That's my 3, yeah.
3, yeah, everything. I'm sure you could add more. In terms of hates, narratively messy and kind of pointless. End feels like the start, a la the Lone Ranger, as I mentioned. It feels too small for too long. Like I said, the stakes just aren't there. There's no real drive for the hero. That's as I've mentioned a couple of times already, that's my big issue. Number 2, the Timothy Dalton reveal just comes far too late. 80 minutes into a 100-minute movie. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know what they were thinking. And 3, Lothar is from a very different movie. I know you have a soft spot for him. And I don't dislike necessarily the character in and of himself, but in this film, he just doesn't belong. And of course, I am going to add number 4. Like I said, Billy Campbell, he's good, but he is a tad forgettable. And, I can't escape the idea. I was like, man, I kind of want 1999's Brendan Fraser kind of transported to this movie, which is very unfair on him because he does a perfectly decent job. But that's my 4, apparently.
It's interesting you say I had a soft spot for Lothar, because Lothar's in my list. He... not because I know you need a henchman and stuff like that, and yes, he does come from Dick Tracy. We've said that many times. It's the fact that nobody seems to notice this giant man. How is this dude doing any work for Neville Sinclair under the radar? It's not happening.
I just love, it's another perfect example of how you and I watch movies in such different ways. And I think it is what fundamentally makes these conversations so interesting. It's he doesn't belong in this movie. And you're just like, no, he just doesn't make sense in this movie. You'll always come back to the fundamentals of the scene. It's like, how is nobody noticing him? How does he get from A to B? Why does that glass break so easily? How did he get those sandwiches so quickly? These are all classic Rob moments. But no, I didn't watch it that way, but I totally agree with you.
Look at the size of him, right? And he's 100%. Escaping on the ledge out of the hospital room. I'm sorry, if I'm on that ledge on the hospital room, my ass alone has pushed me off the fucking roof.
Oh, yeah, don't get me wrong. He disappears like Batman. He totally does. You expect that scene from Batman when you stick your head out the window and already he's gone up over the roof. And you're like, well, how did he do that? But when you see Lothar with his giant fucking feet, you're like, well, no, seriously, how the fuck did he get up there? And that is, we'll never know, is the answer, sadly.
Number 2 for me then is Fitch and Woolley. The 2 FBI agents were fucking annoying. They were there was no point. They were on screen just to be FBI dicks. That's the whole point of them on screen. They're not going to believe anyone right until the last moment when they go, oh, okay, actually, we will help. It was absolutely pointless in having those 2 there.
They kind of added, and I didn't mention them because, like you said, they are a bit pointless, but they added to that whole Benny Hill dynamic. Yeah. And it just felt like everyone running around in circles of the FBI are chasing, God, I keep forgetting his name, Cliff. I keep going to call him Billy, but I know that's the actor's name. They're chasing Cliff. Cliff's chasing someone else. He's got his henchmen. They've got the mafia chasing him. And it just feels like everyone's running around in this tiny little circle for so long. And I totally forgot that the FBI were even a part of it. But yes, they are apparently.
They're wearing the same suits as the mobsters.
Yeah. And it just, again, it comes back this film needed, it's just there's too much. There's not enough time to establish the FBI. So they just have one scene, and exactly to your point, it just feels a bit silly.
Before I say my 3rd, I will add the glass.
You have to add the glass, dude.
The glass was just absolutely pointless. It just didn't...
Hey, this is supposed to be German engineering, for heaven's sake. Come on, guys.
And finally, what I really didn't like was the initial Rocketeer save. Mm-hmm. Not the whole, he keeps falling off the plane and stuff, but the fact he has to save, what was his name, Malcolm?
Yeah.
But Malcolm seemed to be doing quite well until Cliff jams his head through the bottom and knocks Malcolm out. Now, I appreciate Malcolm might not be able to land at this point, but when he's actually trying to rescue Malcolm, Malcolm seems to be handling the plane quite well.
Yeah, he didn't seem to be panicking
for 25
or anything.
years.
Yeah.
But the reason, and it's one of those things, I guess it's like the classic Indiana Jones thing. You didn't need Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark for his.
Yeah, totally.
Like, you didn't need him to rescue Malcolm. He actually caused more damage.
Well, I think you can make the argument that if he had done it successfully, and I know he kind of did it successfully in the end, but if he'd gone up and been graceful about it, it might have made sense. But I guess that's part of the fun, is the fact that he's shit. That. Like, he's got all the heart, he's got all the endeavor, but he's actually a bit rubbish. Yeah,
and that's showcasing him flying and doing those stunts. I get all of that. It just, I guess for the writing side of it, for connotation, it just didn't need to happen.
No, I see what you mean. But that's just reminded me of another scene where, like, because like you say, his head goes up through the bottom of the plane. There's a scene when Lothar grabs Cliff and smashes his head through the ceiling 3 times.
Yes.
And Cliff just shakes it off, like, no sign of concussion, not even a sign that he's been hurt. He's just like, I'm fine. I was like, dude, that looks like it would hurt a lot. Maybe he's just got a hard head.
Thank you. Same scene. Hello, Lothar. The FBI are outside. He pulls out 2 guns, shoot, runs, jumps through a window, gone. That fucking dude.
Oh, yeah, into the night. like a cat. Like a cat.
Like how?
I don't know. I don't know.
I know why. He's a secret Nazi experiment.
And maybe he does turn into a cat?
Maybe.
Maybe. I don't know. This is a stretch now, because nothing about Lothar makes any sense whatsoever. In terms of facts, I had a quick glance. There are tons for this one, so you have to be slightly selective, I suspect.
Yep. I won't go into like everything of this.
No. Just a few off the top, I think would be fair enough.
I will give you the different titles in Bulgaria and Lithuania.
Oh, absolutely.
In Bulgaria, the Rocket Man.
Yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough.
In Lithuania, Human Rocket.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That's almost as bad as Slam Evil in the Face, whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah.
Maybe if you translate it makes more sense, in Bulgarian or whatever, but they're not great. I think we'll stick with the Rocketeer, thanks.
So the actual GB used in filming was only allowed to land a very limited amount of times during its time working on the movie, as landings are extremely hard on the landing gear of this particular plane.
No, fair enough. So it was kind of like, do it in one and let's get the fuck on with our day.
Yeah, pretty much. So that must actually be a plane from the 30s or something like that. They were.
Oh yeah, and that wouldn't surprise me, because again, everything looks kind of correct to the time. Like, it doesn't surprise me whatsoever that you use real planes, because for all its faults, this does feel like a labor of love.
Yeah. The GB Racer was nicknamed the Widowmaker and the Flying Coffin because it was incredibly difficult to fly and was prone to crashing because of its speed and maneuverability.
Shit windows too.
Sorry?
Shit glass as well.
Yeah. Some pilots still raced it despite the danger. Oh, so the racing then. So we figured it was something like that.
Yeah, it was something, but whatever.
In the original graphic novel, Cliff Seacode's girlfriend is called Betty Page, not Jenny Blake.
That's based on the real actress, isn't it? But obviously Disney didn't, like, she's got a somewhat scandalous past and a somewhat sexy demeanor, should we say. So I think that's the reason that they changed her.
Well, the original Betty Page was a 1950s pinup girl, wasn't she? So it's not Disney, no. The original inventor of the rocket pack was 30s pulp novel hero Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze.
Yeah, that's the character I couldn't think of.
Because of licensing considerations, Disney did not seek permission from Condé Nast, the copyright holder of Doc Savage.
Maybe we could just kind of take that bit that you've just said and place that conveniently where I was talking nonsense. I think it was a comic book character. I can't remember his name. Doc fucking Savage.
I love it. Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze. Like, he doesn't even get silver or gold. He's just...
I know. The Man of Copper. I was like, oh, okay. You're a bit shit.
There was a scene cut out, which might have helped you. A scene where Neville Sinclair sends a message to Berlin, coded first on an authentic Enigma machine found for production, was filmed but cut due to running time constraints. So I think you would have had that a bit sooner, and you would have had that hint then. Well, not hint. Clearly sending a message to Berlin. So
like I said, that was big issue. They should have established his motivations much earlier.
Yeah. So the chewing gum is Beeman's.
That's it. That's the
gum
one.
of pilots. In the film The Right Stuff, Chuck Yeager asks his crew member friend for some Beemans before a flight.
See, I was like 60% there with all this stuff. 60%. That's
you're
fine.
nearly there, yeah.
Like a C minus.
Lothar was made up to look like Rondo Hatton, who played similar characters in B movies, which inspired this movie. Ron can be seen out of makeup in a cameo as one of two good old boys. He gapes as his companion marvels at the big gopher.
No, fair enough. I still don't like him in this film.
No. Right, what else have I got here? In the opening sequence, when Eddie's goons are being chased by the FBI, Tommy J. Huff, the stunt performer playing Lenny, was late arriving on set. Thus, when Lenny is first seen firing his Thompson submachine gun from the rumble seat, the character is being played by the movie's transportation captain, Randy Musselman. Yeah, sorry, that was pointless. Oh, there you go.
These haven't been vetted.
Frank Darabont did some uncredited work on the screenplay.
Well, he needs to do a bit more, sadly, but hey.
I've already said Joe Pesci. Yeah, no, this is going on about, like, we've already said the actors and stuff.
Those are the most interesting ones, I think, in fairness.
Yeah.
In terms of like legacy, I mean, we're going to get to the fact that there's a sequel, which somehow I miss. Is that actually been greenlit? Is it like a legacy sequel to this film?
Yeah, Disney Plus. So I always butcher
because I know there's like maybe they're kind of going for it at the moment because there's a kids TV show on Disney Plus called The Rocketeer, and supposedly it's quite popular, certainly much liked. But I didn't know it was. Oh, fair enough. There you go. I didn't know, and I really should have picked that up in the research, that there was actually, a greenlit sequel to this film.
So the Rocketeer TV show is Cliff Secord's granddaughter, who is...
so it's a TV show, not a movie, sorry.
No. So the Rocketeer TV show, the kids one...
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Is about Cliff's granddaughter, and she's flying around and saving things like that. And I believe that Bill Campbell actually comes back to voice Cliff in a couple of episodes.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, as I said, he's one of those guys, like, he's still working a lot. And, one of the legacies of this film is that it didn't kill his career because he's still got a very successful career, but it killed it was his shot at being a big star. And we mentioned in a few other podcasts when we've done quite recently, where you have these actors and you're like, if this was their shot at being the next big thing, and for one reason or another, it didn't quite work out. And what was the film? We did a couple of episodes again. The Fire in the Night. What the fuck's it called? It was like it was all over the place. The film. It's like half set in the 50s, the 80s, and it's got like the gangs and stuff in it.
Streets of Fire.
Streets of Fire. Thank you, Jesus Christ! I explained that so poorly. I was like, Fire of the Streets.
Because I thought you were going Fire in the Sky, which is that DB Sweeney I've been.
No. We covered. I should have remembered. We literally did like 7-8 weeks ago.
Yeah. But
that was another example of a star having his shot as like, oh, he's going to be the guy for this film, and it's similar to Bill Campbell in this film. No, necessarily, it wasn't a fault of his own. He doesn't give like a bad performance. It's just the film doesn't work out, and then his kind of like big, quote unquote, big Hollywood career kind of falls by the wayside, kind of thing. So that is definitely one. But
so
it is.
The sequel.
Go for it. Mm-hmm.
The sequel was greenlit in August 2021. I always butcher his name. Sorry, David Oyelowo. I can never. I can't. Sorry, I do apologize. I can't pronounce his name. Oyelowo. So I don't know if you know him. He was in like Red Tails. He's
Yes, I do know him. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to find anything that Wrinkle in Time, a Gringo, United Kingdom. That's the one he probably known for, and The Queen of Cataway, A Most Violent Year, Selma, where he played Martin Luther King Jr. Anyway.
Yeah, he's a great actor, but is he going to be the new Rocketeer? Is he?
Yeah, so apparently he's producing it with his wife, production company, but he may also star in the role. It's going to center on a former Tuskegee Airman who inherits the rocket pack suit from the Rocketeer. So,
fair enough.
So it'll be set. The Tuskegee Airmen, they were the 40s, weren't they? They were World War II, so it'll be set after or during World War II, I guess, and.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still of the mindset that this needs to be a TV show, personally, because I think there's, rather than a movie, but hey, like if it works, like the fundamentals are there to make a great something, whether it be a TV show or a movie. It's just, this doesn't, again, I keep trying to stick the landing. It feels like an intentional pun, but
I will say
there is a great movie to be made out of this.
I will say in November 2020, November just gone, 2022, the director, what was his name? J.D. Dillard. He pulled out of the film because he wanted to take a breather from period aviation because he just did that Devotion with the Hangman in
That sounds a bit bullshitty because
Yeah.
it's like he knew what he was getting into, so there's probably issues there. And the fact that I've heard so little about it suggests it's probably not very far along at all. But the fact that it's even being talked about is, I think, a good thing.
I've always been a thing. If you're going to make a sequel, make a good one, and that's not always the case. But you don't always need a sequel for films. But I have been looking forward to it. I want to see more Rocketeer. I do want to see more Rocketeer. So,
well, yeah, there's, like I said, there's a great movie in there. It's not quite here, so I'd be more than I think this is, a great example of a film which arguably needs updating. But as I've kind of got my heart set on a TV show, but obviously it's not happening. Nope. But the reason that we're even having this conversation is because fundamentally this film has become a cult classic. Like, make no mistake, it wasn't the biggest bomb of all time, but relatively speaking, it did bomb. But opinion over time has totally warmed on this film. It's totally found its audience. And I think being on Disney Plus, stuff like that, and it is an easy watch, and the fact of the matter is, whatever its faults may have been, it was, it did fall foul of circumstances to a large extent. We mentioned at the top of the podcast, this is up against T2, this was up against Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and it's almost like, Jesus Christ, it's like some films, when the one that jumps to mind was like, remember Titanfall 2? I know I'm jumping into the world of video games, but that was released, and this was fucking EA's fault, but they released it in the week between Call of Duty and Battlefield coming out, and it was just doomed to fail. And that doesn't mean, like, Titanfall 2 was the best of those three games.
It is a great game.
It's an unfucking believable, like the single player campaign is one of the best. Again, I could just talk for ages about Titanfall 2, but the single player campaign is one of the best first person shooter single campaigns literally ever. The multiplayer is spectacular, but it was just up against Juggernaut and it died a death. And it was the same as this. I'm not saying this film is as good as Titanfall 2. It's not. But if you had released this at a quiet time of year and it wasn't going up against two of the most beloved films of the early 90s, it might have stood a chance of making its money back and maybe getting that sequel, which retrospectively would have made the first movie make more sense, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But hey-ho. What was I going to mention in terms of legacy? We haven't mentioned the fact that this was written by Dave Stevens. He was the writer of the original graphic novel. But this was actually bought up really quickly after it was published. And I think it's a weird thing that I got caught between two worlds, because I think this was purchased because of the popularity of Indiana Jones. But then it kind of died down, and suddenly you're trying to sell it as a superhero film, and the superhero movie, like, it wasn't a thing in the mid-'80s. So this kind of just sat there and it couldn't get made for the longest time. And then it took Batman, the success of Batman, suddenly go, okay, well, we're suddenly looking for a superhero film. So it was almost like it got bought for one reason, because it was a 30s serial, and then got made 10 years later because it was a superhero film. So it was just this really weird kind of set of coincidences and the success of other films, which actually got it bought and then subsequently made. So I thought that was quite an interesting one. In terms of the score, this was famously put together in, I think it was 3 weeks by James Horner. He said it was like the hardest, but one of the most fun jobs he's ever had.
Great score, though.
It's an absolutely fantastic score. And a lot of people think, that's one of the movie's, not only one of the movie's strongest points, but it's one of James Horner's best scores. And when you consider the scores that James Horner put together, I mean, we're talking Avatar, The Amazing Spider-Man, Apocalypto, another film we should redo for this podcast, Zorro, Titanic, Ransom, another film maybe for this podcast, Field of Dreams, Willow, Aliens, Commando, Wrath of Khan. These are all fantastic scores. And the fact that this is kind of considered one of his better ones speaks to the quality. But like the visuals, one of the things that totally stands out is the music in this film. And I know it's another thing Darry loves in particular, and one of the reasons he keeps coming back to it. But again, as someone coming to this film relatively fresh face, couldn't really remember, no real attachment, beyond the visuals, the other thing that totally stood out for me is that score by James Horner, which is absolutely fantastic. In terms of video games, there was like a NES game and a Super NES game, and like so many games of this era, they weren't the same. They're very different beasts. And bizarrely, it's actually the NES version which was a lot more successful. It's not a great game, but it's more your kind of classic side scroller. And I guess, if nothing else, it successfully follows-ish the plot of the film, and it looks the part. The Super NES version, which obviously would have been much more technically impressive at the time, you go back and look at it now, man, it is fucking rough. It reminds me of, remember the Batman Forever video game? Like, it had that kind of vibe. And I know you mentioned earlier about that whole thing about going to the Nationals. What's the point of this? And the fact that they don't spend much time on it in the movie. Well, they spend fucking plenty of time on it in the game. Because you end up flying that horrible plane. Horrible plane seems unfair because it's a gorgeous plane in the film. Terrible plane in the video game. there's a lot of time spent doing that, and then the flying mechanics when you finally do become the Rocketeer just feel rough. So it's one of those, if you saw a screenshot, you may be like, oh, that actually looks okay, but the Super NES version is to be massively avoided. If you do want to go back and play a Rocketeer game, play the NES version. Again, not amazing, but not terrible either. However, if you really want to play a Rocketeer game, Capcom blatantly ripped off the Rocketeer on the Xbox 360 with Dark Void, a massively underrated game. Man, I fucking love Dark Void. It is the unofficial Rocketeer video game.
I can't believe you've stolen my thunder. Only because when you were going to say, what would you like to see in a video game? I was just going to say Dark Void.
No, well, it's the answer. Like, what do you want to see from a Rocketeer video game? The answer is Dark Void, 100%.
I mean, it is basically the Rocketeer. It's set in like some weird alternate dimension jumping thing, and then
it's like that kind of like retro futuristic. Yeah. They lean more into futuristic as well,
where you were able to do the whole rocket thing and then go on the side of a cliff and hide under the cliff and then shoot the guys and stuff like that. And the fact that the hero was played by Nolan North, who is Drake for me
from Uncharted.
So I was always in on this, but mate, honestly, Dark Void is. Do you know what? It's on the PS Network. I might have to just go back and play it again.
Well, I loved the game back when it was originally released. Would have been like 2008, 2009, something like that. It was peak kind of like 360 era PlayStation 3. I always think of this as being like a 360 game more than anything else. But it was kind of like overlooked when it was released and maybe it was because it was up against stuff like Gears of War and stuff. But the flying mechanics were right out of Crimson Skies. I'm not sure if you're aware of that game, but that was an OG Xbox game when you were flying a plane, admittedly, but it felt very similar to this. So for this to work, the one thing, obviously, above all else that has to work are the flying mechanics. The flying mechanics are fantastic. And as you mentioned, the fact that you can land and go straight into a cover shooter, a successful cover shooter at that, I was like, this game was great. As to whether it holds up in 2023, God, I almost said 2022, 2023. I'm not sure, but it was fantastic then. And you can pick it up for basically nothing now. So it's worth a shot. So yes, well, it's basically, I want a HD version of the Rocketeer.
It's free if you've got PS Plus. So I think I'll download it. But
if you want to play a Rocketeer video game, give that a go. For sure.
You want to go rip off of the Rocketeer, or as we like to say, the video game remake of the Rocketeer. Mm-hmm. To the point as well where they get a famous inventor out of time and hell. So you in the film had Howard Hughes. The game has Nikola Tesla.
I mean, it's so on the nose. I mean, you only need to look at literally the cover art for this video game. It's the Rocketeer. Yes, it's like the same helmet, he has the brown leather coat. It's the same fucking dude.
He's a pilot, isn't he? He is a pilot. Yeah.
Dude, it's the same fucking thing. It's unbelievable that they
Although his name is no Cliff Secord, is it? What was his name? I found it here. William Augustus Gray. Bill Gray.
Well, I mean, they had the decency to change the fucking names. But other than that, and yes, they do lean more into the futuristic element. Like he is, like you said, the alternative dimension stuff where there are like alien spacecrafts or whatever the hell they are. But aesthetically, it feels very similar. The suit is the same. The mechanics are the Rocketeer. It's pretty shameless. And I think he got away with it because nobody was talking about fucking the Rocketeer in 2007.
He was Cliff Secord in the film. They should have just called this guy, like, I don't know, Cliff River Rope or something.
Biff Seedord. Like they should have done a Pro Evo on him where they just changed like 2 of the letters and just be, oh, that's good enough. We'll just get off to the races. But yeah, changing it from like Howard Hughes to Nicholas, it's like, come on, guys. It's so blatant. But
it's great.
The point is, it's a really good game. Yeah. So yes, what do we want from a Rocketeer game? We want Dark Void, basically. That's what we want.
I can't believe you did that.
The Rocket, we just want the rock, but it's the correct answer. That's why.
It is
100% the correct answer. So I'd like to thank Dari for that. So the reason we've been covering this is because Dari Fletcher, the guy who does all the art for our podcast, he encouraged us to rewatch this. And like I said, despite its faults, I'm glad I went back and gave this film a go. In terms of recommendations and scores, though, so I just wanted to give that caveat that I did enjoy watching it. I am glad we kind of revisited it. Would I recommend it? Maybe. As I said, this film has a lot of problems, but I still love a lot of what this film does, but I don't think I could recommend it because I think it has too many faults. In terms of a score, I'm going to give it a 3.
Oh, nice. I was half expecting a 2 or even your first 2.5.
No, there's points when it dips to a 2. there are moments where this is a 2-star film, but there are also moments when it's a 4-star film. Yes. So I'm leveling off at a 3. Like, you know, the peaks are very high, the troughs are very low, but fundamentally it's a decent film, but it's just flawed. That's all.
So this is going to be an interesting one, because I said I've loved this film. I've watched this film numerous times in my history. I really enjoy this film. In my history. Yeah. I really enjoy this film. It's not a film I could it's not a film I would recommend to others, because you either know The Rocketeer or you don't. It's not a film that I feel others who've never heard of it would go, oh, that's great. That's the film for me. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think it's a film I would recommend, but scoring wise, it's a 4.
I get it.
It's definitely a 4.
Yeah, well, like I said before, like coming in from different ways, you're going to be a lot more forgiving of its faults because you grew up with the film. And as I said, like, it depends what you're kind of singling, you know, kind of like what your emphasis is on. Sorry, I can't speak, when you're watching this film. And I couldn't get away from the faults, but there's great stuff in it. So I understand why people love this film. And some people do genuinely love this film. And there's a lot to like about it. But it's that same issue, as you said. Would you just go recommending it to anyone in 2023? I'm not sure. I think it's one of those films that you really needed to potentially grow up with. But we'll see. So yeah, that's been the Rocketeer. Whose choice is it next week? Because that was Darry's choice. It's yours next week. Right?
Yes, we're starting
fresh.
The floor
is yours.
We were starting fresh. We had Darry choose, so we're going my choice next week, and we're going. Spoiler alert: we're going for a 5-star film next week.
No, bold.
1999's Galaxy Quest.
Oh, is that bold? I haven't seen this film for a long time. You saying that's a 5-star film doesn't feel outrageous. Galaxy Quest is an amazing film, and I haven't seen it for like maybe a decade. Yeah, I'd be amazed if it's anything other than great, because it always was. But
it's been a while since I've seen it, but I gotta feel that it's gonna be a 5-star film. No, I may be wrong. After I rewatch it, but
the thing is, though, I think it's one of those films. And again, spoiler, I can't see it being less than a 4. Whether it's a 5, that's the whole point of revisiting these films. But it is one of the most likable films of, I was going to say, modern times. When was it released? 1999. 99. That was actually quite a while ago. Yeah. It's such a likable film. Yeah. I don't think I've ever met anyone with an unkind word to say about Galaxy Quest. So I think the only real question is, how great is Galaxy Quest in 2023? Is it good or is it amazing? So I guess we'll find out next week.
We finally get an actual film with one of our faves in, Sam Rockwell. Now, Sam Rockwell has appeared in a couple of films that we've done, namely Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as just a random bit character. But it's not what you would call a Sam Rockwell film, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But Sam Rockwell, if I remember rightly, is great in this.
He is, and that's one of the points of this film, is that everyone is great in this film. Yeah. Everyone's throwing 100 miles per hour. It's just like, everyone's on top form. Another film with quite an emphasis on boobs as well. Sigourney Weaver's boobs play a pretty big part in this film.
That's the joke, isn't it?
That is the joke, though. Yeah. That's the difference with this film.
She was literally the character.
Basically making fun of Jennifer Connelly's character in this film. But yeah, so please do join us next week for Galaxy Quest and find out whether Galaxy Quest is indeed great or absolutely spectacular, because it's one of the fucking two. But yeah, as always, thanks for listening. Please do join next week. Thanks all. Have a great year. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers, guys. The Rocker who?
Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. We're also on email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. And just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing. Thanks for that, mate.
Cheers, Darry.
Yeah. And thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye.